Hey, everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. And I'm very pleased to have with me today Doug Merritt, who's the CEO of Aviatrix. Doug, thank you for joining me today.
Good morning, Doug. Thanks for having me on.
So, Doug, I'm excited to be able to do this podcast. We're going to be talking about Aviatrix's newly released survey of 403 U.S. IT professionals from large organizations that revealed an alarming security gap and therefore the need for cloud native security fabric, CNSF. We're going to be talking about that more in just a second. But Doug, tell me a little bit about Aviatrix.
Absolutely. Always a good place to start. So before I got to Aviatrix, I didn't know that an Aviatrix was a female pilot. So that just for fun facts for the audience. We were founded by a female engineer from Cisco who had a really deep networking background. And we are in the cloud, which went to Aviatrix being a female pilot. But we're a little bit over 10 years old, and the majority of the tenure of Aviatrix has been focusing on how do we make networking much more elegant, cost efficient, operationally efficient, responsive, resilient within the cloud. The team here has a deep networking background from Nicira, which was the foundation of NSX at VMware, which really evangelized software-defined networking decades ago. Cisco, Juniper, and a whole host of other organizations. But we also have really deep network security expertise as well, with well over half of our team coming from different network security disciplines, whether that's firewalling or microsegmentation or other key elements that try and use the network to drive security into the landscape. We're a little bit under $100 million in revenue, roughly 400 employees, US based. We've got the bulk of our employees in the US and the Northern California area, but we hired like crazy during COVID. So we're pretty distributed. And so in my tenure here, I was the CEO of Splunk for 8 years. Took 2 years off, thought that I was retired, realized that I'm a really bad retired person. I miss being part of a team. And so came back to Aviatrix almost 2 years ago. And during my tenure, we wound up springing up a good sized presence in Bangalore. So we've got about 30-40% of our team in Bangalore as well.
And, true to the heritage of your company, the genetic heritage of your company, it seems like you guys really specialize in helping your clients navigate through challenges, just like the Aviatrix.
Yes, just like the female pilot. Yeah, for sure. I think we are a kind of a contrarian company. I think when the initial team was evangelizing a different approach to networking in the cloud, that was a pretty avant-garde set of views. There were very few networking constructs that AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI provided. The ones that they did were pretty deficient. They're still not nearly as technologically effective as ours, I don't think. But they really saw a problem before the people saw it. They saw production level workloads go in the cloud. There has been this orientation as we've really done an awesome job of emphasizing developer efficiency and developer effectiveness, of really downplaying or mitigating the other critical aspects of IT. And networking is one of those. It's just almost become invisible, I think, within most IT organizations. Not many CIOs spend deep tenure in the networking world, and it all just happens magically. And the team here understands that to really have cost-efficient, resilient, and tuned capability, that networking is a foundational aspect of any technology deployment, and that it matters what you do with networking. And what we've done over the past year is taken our networking heritage and the strength that we have around network security and emphasized the network security aspect as the core element of what Aviatrix does. So the cloud native security fabric that you led with, we can spend a little more time on what that is. But that really is leveraging the heritage of Aviatrix. I spent time with every customer that we have, and with every prospect that was in the funnel, and the team that I brought in did as well. And the resounding theme was you are really unparalleled in what you do with networking, which is great, but that is not one of our top 10 most urgent items. And really the reason we use Youth for networking was we have a cloud security issue that networking can be critical in solving. And so that is as people begin to get familiar with Aviatrix, if we do our job well, they'll think about us as a cloud security company that's really evangelizing this category called the Cloud Native Security Fabric category.
Okay, so break it down for me. What is CNSF and why do we need it?
So at the core, I view CNSF as the third leg of a zero trust stool. And we all know that a stool with two legs is not a good stool. It's not a stool, it's a liability. It doesn't do its job. If I think about the other two, what are the three legs? What are necessary? There's three elements in the cyber world where runtime investigation and enforcement can happen, where true inline capability exists. One is identity and access. That's been, I think, the most highly visible aspect of zero trust. Companies like Zscaler leading the charge there, and a very important, you need all three legs. So all these are important. So very important elements of zero trust. The second is endpoint. Companies like CrowdStrike and many others really do an effective job of ensuring that the device is secure and has a zero trust policy. But the third is network. And as networking shifted to the cloud, there's a huge gap in a zero trust stance on the communications are happening workload to workload in a customer's cloud environment that provides a pretty massive and unguarded attack surface for almost any organization that has any significant volume of workloads in the cloud. So it's the third leg of a zero trust initiative. Thank you, Scotty.
No, this is really interesting. And this sort of, as we talked about at the very beginning, you're trying to actually fill a gap. You recognized a gap and a change in the way that working on the cloud introduced.
Yes, that was the customers, I think, are such an important source of truth. And it helps that the team here has got a rich history in lots of different domains. But as we were talking to customers, it became really apparent that the mechanisms, the architecture, the thought process, the processes that security teams have held dear for decades don't serve them well in the cloud. And there's three fundamental things that I believe have shifted that provide this huge necessity for zero trust cloud workload, a cloud network security fabric, if you really want to protect yourself. The first, if we really look at how did cybersecurity evolve in our world around us, the primary purpose was to protect critical assets from the internet. Security before the internet was harden that data center, make sure you know who goes in and out. And then everything inside is pretty safe. As soon as you connected these very untrusted pipes, this open internet to the data center, you saw the birth of professional vendors that were really focused on protecting that data center from the internet. So you had a castle and moat orientation, had to protect the data center from the internet, and then guarded that perimeter very, very, very carefully. And then east-west traffic or lateral traffic, the traffic between an SAP app and an Oracle database, let's say, inside that data center was safe. It was trusted. You didn't have to have a zero trust stance. Those two have blown up. Now, the internet for most organizations is the enterprise network. The majority of the critical services that any organization accesses for their critical workloads have direct internet access. Something as simple as an Amazon S3 bucket. That's an internet service. Your Snowflake database, internet service. Your OpenAI calls for ChatGPT, internet service. So the internet is largely the enterprise network, and the perimeter has atomized. Instead of having 5 data centers you have to guard, every workload needs a perimeter. So every VPC, virtual private cloud, every VNet, every VCN, every cloud calls it something different, every Kubernetes cluster, every API endpoint, every SaaS and PaaS service that you're accessing is its perimeter. So you've gone from 5 or 10 perimeters to thousands or tens of thousands of perimeters. And then the third element that has snuck up on us is many of these workloads are ephemeral. So the old idea that I've got a static IP address completely disappears. You've got workloads that could be a millisecond in duration could be longer, but you cannot count on them actually being there. They're not stateful any longer. So when you look at the internet as the corporate network, the perimeter atomizing, and the majority of workloads becoming ephemeral, you have to completely change your perspective on network security. And that's the core of a cloud native security fabric. Our orientation, what we call it a fabric, is if you've got 1,000 workloads or 10,000 workloads across 2 or 3 different cloud instances as a major government organization or corporation, you better have something that is able to inspect the communications between every single one of those workloads. You got to ask every single time in Zero Trust, is this workload allowed to talk to this workload in this circumstance or not? Is this app able to access this database? And that's something that Aviatrix does very elegantly, given our history of providing detailed networking services for organizations with the security capabilities wrapped into that networking.
So, Doug, my understanding is that a lot of this was driven by customer feedback, but from what you were hearing and experiencing, and actually you guys released a survey about that.
We did.
What did you find?
Yeah, as you started with the interview, over 400 IT professionals that engaged. We sent out the survey to more than that, and the findings were very consistent with the dialogue that we've had, which is when you really dig in and begin to ask these organizations detailed questions about their cloud network security stance. Organizations are deeply struggling with that. We found that over 2/3 of the organizations struggle with effective cloud firewall deployment, which makes sense because if you really want to inspect every in and out communication with every workload and every communication between workloads, that would mean you have to distribute your firewalls to every single workload you have. And that's not the way that firewalls were architected. So organizations have to do very difficult tasks to try and route as much of the communications as possible through those firewalls, and they're leaving a bunch of those communications unguarded. And because of that, they found that only 8% of organizations felt they had a really effective Zero Trust stance. That was really important to us because I'm worried Zero Trust has been around for a decade now, and not all of them have gone super easily for organizations. It's like, are we selling into a fatigued audience when we say, hey, there's a third leg of a Zero Trust stool? And what we found from the survey is, it's not, we're trying. We only feel like we've got 8% coverage, which would make sense. Without all 3 legs, you don't have a stool, therefore you don't really have Zero Trust. And then we're seeing support in the industry with this stance as well. CISA just updated their Zero Trust maturity model, and network security is one of the core elements that they're emphasizing. So that goes with the 8% that came back and said, we really don't feel like we've got a Zero Trust stance that works. And then over half the organizations cited visibility blind spots, that they don't really understand where the traffic is going. And without having that inspection on all traffic inside the cloud, it leaves them very vulnerable. That would go back to low scores on Zero Trust. And then finally, while people are struggling with deploying firewalls, cloud firewalls, the way that they'd like to, these are also very expensive tools. And so we found that 1 in 3 organizations was shocked by a budget overrun for the firewalls they're trying to deploy. So that whole thing just tells me the way that organizations are going about trying to get visibility and secure capability inside the clouds is not yet working for them. And something like a cloud native security fabric could really help in that area.
And you mentioned earlier also east-west traffic vulnerabilities.
That is, when I think about the core elements of the cloud native security fabric, the first is what people would normally call egress. I've got a workload and it's connected to the internet. Are you watching those connections? If you think about what an attacker wants, they want to insert themselves into a workload and then take a command and control position. I've got a piece of code. I call out to my commander, and my commander now can begin to guide what I do. So if you're not watching those communications, egress traffic from those workloads, then you are very vulnerable to the beginnings of an attack, a command and control piece. The second piece that they do is they begin to try and they map. Attackers think in graphs. So they'll sit in that workload and they'll look at network traffic and they'll build a picture of, okay, here's what this cloud looks like or the entire network looks like. And they'll try and identify the more interesting assets they want to go after. They probably didn't land in a super high value asset. So then they begin to move east-west. They begin to move laterally and work to get credentials so they can get access to the things they really care about, a critical application, critical data stores, or maybe they're trying to insert malware and shut you down completely, like Marks and Spencer just had to deal with, or Change Health and UHG had to deal with last year. That's super cataclysmic. But in either case, if you can monitor egress traffic, you can begin to stop that command and control activity. If you watch east-west and have some type of macro segmentation, you can stop that movement. So you dramatically contain the blast radius. So egress is critical. Macro segmentation with east-west is critical. Can this workload talk to this workload? And then micro segmentation becomes critical as well. I'm inserted into a Kubernetes cluster. What should be happening on a more micro basis as far as communications channels that are acceptable or not acceptable within that workload? So those are the key elements of a cloud-native security fabric.
And your survey had an astounding number. It was like overwhelmingly 85% of respondents reported challenges securing DevOps pipelines.
Yes. This move to DevOps is phenomenal. It's created an amazing speed quotient that we need. We have to move very, very quickly. It's a competitive landscape. We need more features, functions deployed as rapidly as possible. And DevOps is absolutely critical to that movement. Networking and network security has not been as well integrated into that DevOps pipeline as it should be. So the infrastructure as code movement that so many developers are comfortable with when they're actually doing the core work still needs some evangelism to other aspects of the core technology stack. So I'd also say that other elements of the CNSF is it should enable encryption of the traffic so that you can protect that traffic from any type of peering eyes. Then it's got to be developer friendly. If the cyber team gets in the way of the developer, they're just going to be run over. We've seen that over and over because the CEO is like me, is pounding on, hey, go faster, ship more, but do it safely. Please do it safely. So you've got to integrate really deeply and tightly into the developer mindset and the developer pipeline so that the cyber team feels like they are getting what they want, which is visibility and security and control without slowing down the pace of development.
And now with all that going on, we have also the challenge of agentic AI.
Yes, I couldn't be more excited over the next few years about the impact that agentic AI and Gen AI is going to drive for all of us and for businesses. I think we're all holding our breath to see what happens like 5 years out or 10 years out or 20 years out. But the next few years are going to be incredible. And that it's incredibly powerful. It's something that we're driving internally aggressively at Aviatrix, both marrying Gen AI and agentic AI with our products, but then also how we use it internally. But if you think about the landscape that I painted with workloads and actors increasing at a very high rate without inspection, agentic and Gen AI just puts that on steroids. Now you have generally ephemeral frameworks. I think about if I want an agentic AI deployment, I'm going to probably be using something like the MCP server standard. I have a lot more pathways and workloads being created dynamically to fulfill missions. And I've taken the number of actors that are communicating, which was once my employees, and every employee is going to have 10, 20, 100, 1,000 agents working with them to try and get their job done. So the chaos within these clouds, or the need to get visibility and control at the network security layer, I think is going on an asymptotic curve right now. And agentic AI and Gen AI is one of those drivers. A lot of people talk also about what are the threats that we're going to see with agentic and Gen AI. That I think is the urgency of CISOs. You have to focus on this third leg of the stool because you now have the ability for 24/7, highly intelligent and largely autonomous negative cyber activity within your graph that attackers are trying to map. So the urgency that I feel every day on doing this type of work and trying to educate and evangelize, like, hey, please pay attention to this third leg of the stool, whether you use Aviatrix or not. educate yourself and understand how big that exposure area is. Got even more intense the past 6, 7, 8 months as we saw agentic AI begin to take hold, as it should. Like, it's incredibly powerful.
So, Doug, as we wrap up our podcast today, could you give me sort of an overall view of how Aviatrix and Aviatrix CNSF is specifically addressing the issues we discussed?
Yeah, we've got, for anyone out there, one on the partner side, a CNSF and Aviatrix in this case, we complement the majority of technology that you already are familiar with. To do our job properly as a third leg of the stool, we integrate with EDR and XDR vendors. We integrate with the Wizzes and the CSPM vendors to bring them to life. They do an amazing job of scanning. How do you enforce? We integrate with the identity and access zero trust vendors. We actually integrate with firewalls as well, because we know that most customers have got a number of firewalls already deployed. And how do you make sure that you don't make it a full lift and shift activity? We can integrate with those as well. So very friendly as far as a new revenue source. But for the call to action, we've got a network security blind spot assessment that we can do for organizations to help bring this to life for CISOs. And what we found in working with organizations is they tend to start in one of two areas. You don't have to deploy the entire fabric at once. We try and do it in bite-sized chunks based on the need of the organization. So we find that people tend to either start with high-performance encryption from their data centers to clouds or between clouds. How do we just get some degree of assurance that the traffic is safe from an encryption level? Or they start with egress inspection. Do a scan, understand all the different workloads that have either direct access to the internet or second party dangerous access to the internet. And how do you guard that traffic, that egress traffic, the in and out traffic from those workloads? And then begin to develop a roadmap of, all right, now here's how we can begin to map east-west traffic. And here's how we can do macro segmentation. And here's how we can do micro segmentation for you. And we'll start with just your US East AWS cloud. But now let's look at the other regions you're using AWS. And then let's bring that exact same framework that's consistent to all the other clouds that you are operating in. So you've got one centralized policy and enforcement framework across the clouds.
Your team was saying that it's not bolted on.
It's not bolted on. It's embedded. That is an important characteristic. You're so good, Doug, of a CNSF delivery. Is the cloud is different. It is architected going back to the internet as a network, and the perimeter is atomized. Like if you really sit and digest the way that cloud architecture has evolved, to take an application that was built before that architecture and try and slam it into the cloud, you can. We've seen that. I can take my virtualized workloads from my old data center and just run them in the cloud. They're not running efficiently the way that cloud works. So for CNSF to work, it needs to be embedded deeply into the cloud. If you want to inspect communications flows and be able to enforce real-time and runtime everywhere that package could live within the cloud, then it's got to be a native. Is why we use the term fabric. It's got to feel like a native construct that integrates deeply into the cloud environment of each one of these organizations so that they feel like they're covered. Again, if we go back to attackers thinking graphs, they're just looking for one weak point. So if you don't have coverage across the entire landscape, then you are vulnerable to the beginnings of attack, the initial insertion, and then the inspection and the patience for them to figure out how they can move from one spot to another.
And Doug, as we wrap up our conversation today, you've mentioned at least once channel opportunity. I realize this is really the solution is directed at the enterprise and others, but it sounds like it might be a good opportunity for channel partners, MSPs, and so
on. Yes, for sure. As I talked about a little bit earlier, or I guess teased, very complementary to the technologies that many channel partners have already invested in. So it should be new to add to the revenue that you've already driven within your customer base. And again, remember, it's adding the third leg of the stool that they're missing. So it's absolutely mission critical for these accounts. But I've got a long lineage of companies, tech companies that sometimes do a great job with channel and sometimes don't. I can't say that all vendors are very successful there. And we've really taken the time and the pains to craft what we believe is a highly lucrative, highly friendly, and easy channel and partner program.
So although that's sometimes a speed bump, right? It's a sophisticated thing to sell, but you guys have endeavored to simplify the process of selling it.
Yes, trying to chunk it up into bite sizes, as we talked about earlier, so you don't have to do a whole enterprise sale right away. But then also just the constructs of the program itself, revenue neutral with our own reps, high overall revenue take for customers, easy to earn increases in capability, a lot of benefits within the program itself. A lot of lessons learned, having been with many companies. We experimented a lot with the channel at Splunk. Got some things well, didn't do other things as well. So I urge you all to check it out. I think that you'd be impressed with the program itself.
So Doug, the survey we discussed today, is it available to the public?
It is. It's a great survey, and I thank you for that call to action also. There's a lot of information there. I literally glanced over a couple of the headlines. But if you want to learn more about the overall landscape within most organizations today, and why something like a cloud native security fabric is such an important element to add to that landscape, please spend some time in the State of Cloud Network Security. It is a good and easy read, I have to say. You can just find it at aviatrix.com resources. It's there and easy to access.
So just go to aviatrix.com and navigate through the resources. It's basically right there. I think I found it in 1 or 2 clicks.
Awesome.
Well, Doug, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This has been really interesting. There's so much to talk about. I really hope we get to do a follow-up podcast on some of these topics again. But for now, thank you very much indeed.
Me too. I've really enjoyed it also. And I really appreciate you having me on. And there's, a lot of deep dives we could do as we continue to progress the cloud native security fabric.
Well, Doug, again, thank you very much indeed.